Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two musicians who used to play in a band together and share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. If you haven't seen the movie we're talking about, then don't worry. The first half of the episode will be pretty high level and spoiler free, and then we'll play a warning before we start talking about any major plot twists in the ending. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So Leo's birthday was last week, and this week, to celebrate, we went and saw The Curse of La Llorona, which is the latest installment in the Conjuring universe.
Okay.
And it was okay, but definitely not my favorite. But it was still nice to see like a high budget, well made horror movie.
Yeah.
But it felt kind of toned down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it was a lot less intense and more Hollywood-ish than I think some of the previous ones. And like it just felt more open to like a general audience and not as like hardcore horror. And so to then get to come back and rewatch The Conjuring 2, which definitely goes hard, was really refreshing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too when I was watching it. I was like, okay, it's a longer movie.
Yeah.
But it's just not like I initially, which I'll kind of get into this. I initially wasn't too big of like I was a big fan of these types, but it's definitely changed over the years, and I'll kind of touch base on that. But
cool.
Yeah, it was like you were saying, it was definitely refreshing because it's like we were kind of doing the creature, and it's like. This, you know what you're getting yourself into, I guess, you know what I mean? So, like, it's going to be haunting. So.
Yeah. Well, and I hadn't seen this movie since it was in theaters, so it's been a few years. And I definitely still enjoyed it, but I also think the experience of seeing it in a theater versus watching it at home was really different for a couple of important reasons. But we'll get into that more later in the episode. So I'm going to pull a little bit of a James Wan and foreshadow the ending of the episode right here in the beginning. So just so you understand how pro we are. Like but yeah. So anyway, I'll do the introduction and then we'll get into it. Cool. In 2016, Warner Brothers Pictures released a wildly successful sequel to The Conjuring. This film, directed by James Wan, again follows paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren as they travel to England in 1977 to investigate reports of a malicious presence in a home. The Conjuring 2 was made on a budget of $40 million and brought in over $320 million at the box office. It can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video.
Nice. It makes sense why The Curse of La Llorona is a little bit different because it's not a James Wan.
Yeah, it definitely it had a different feel than the other movies in the series. Yeah. And it was interesting to me too because it wasn't as like closely tied. So I feel like The Conjuring 2, for example, plays really well with The Nun and the new, like The Crooked Man that's going to be coming out. Like those are very direct ties. And Annabelle has at least a cameo in all of the other movies. But La Llorona, I'm not really sure what the tie-in to the universe is. There were definitely some things in it that tied it back, but I haven't seen as much in these movies that tie them to it, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I have a couple little facts, and it's kind of about this movie, but it's also about the actual haunting that took place.
Oh yeah, because this one, so most of these movies are at least loosely based on things that the Warrens actually investigated. Yeah.
So just like a couple little facts about this. So James Wan, I guess he was like offered to direct The Fate of the Furious.
Oh yeah,
from the Fast and Furious in 2017, and was like offered a saint. Like I got a couple different numbers, so I'm not gonna mention them, but it was like an insane amount of money to do that. But he turned that down specifically to do this movie.
Good for him.
Yeah, his actual quote was, "I feel rejuvenated to tell a scary story one more time." The way he wrote on Instagram. So I thought that was pretty cool because got to keep it going. So this takes place on, suppose, like an actual story. one of the real life allegations that wasn't put in the movie was, I guess, the kids' toys were like messed around with quite a bit and like thrown around, and like, I mean, you can see like the fire truck kind of, but like they were even saying that like that the toys got like extremely hot, like you couldn't touch it without getting burned. So they kind of did that, but
it wasn't as much of a focus.
Right, exactly. So this is based off of the Enfield, I think it's Enfield House haunting or something. I think that's what they call it. So Ed and Lorraine, they actually only came down for one day for the investigation, and they weren't even invited.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting. So there was a lot of like narrative to the story that was added that wasn't based on the real story.
Yeah, and so there's another investigator, and he's portrayed as the guy who's doing like the first interview with the girls when they're on the couch. It was actually like I can't remember his name.
But he was like the guy that was kind of balding on top and had the big mustache. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was actually like his it was his, basically like his finding of this. So really, he should have been the main characters. But anyway, I just thought it was kind of interesting that they said that they came down, but it was for the one day, and I'm sure being in England had something to do with it, but what can you do? Anyway, so this is like, I guess, the case, the haunting is a pretty like, as most haunting things are, pretty debated story. Mm-hmm. And it's also crazy because it's like they have a ton of footage of like pictures that were taken that were supposedly happening during like the haunting. There's a scene where one of the girls is like caught she's filmed from another house, like actually bending and throwing stuff around in the kitchen.
Yeah, so there, and the idea there was that she had claimed that the ghost or the presence had done that, but they had video of her actually doing it.
Exactly. I think it was Janet. Yeah, Janet. Mm-hmm. So that actually happened in real life, and I guess they said that there was like footage of her like bending a spoon, which was like they brought that up, and there was a couple things that she tried to bend but she couldn't, so she threw them. Like it was a little bit more realistic than what was in the movie. And then what was the other thing? So there's everyone can look this up. It's kind of cool, but there's pictures out there that's taken in like sequence of like, I can't remember how many seconds, but it's like I think it was Janet getting picked up and thrown across the room.
Oh wow.
And I don't know. I don't know if this if it's true or not, but for me it looks like she's kind of jumping off the bed.
Yes.
But you see her like up above the bed, kind of like going at an angle, like screaming, and then like another picture that was taken like with her in the middle of the air, and then another with and there's like the kids in the background, and that are sleeping in another bed. So it's interesting stuff to look up for sure. And
I liked that they included a lot of that in the ending credits. Mm-hmm. And it's something that struck me with that was how exact they had recreated some of those scenes. Like they did a really good job of kind of being true to the original. Right.
And obviously it's going to be debated back and forth, but they also show do they show that in the ending too? The actual interview the girls do?
They played audio from it, yeah.
Okay, so you can actually watch it on YouTube.
Oh, on video.
It's interesting stuff. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
You can see, the girl when the voice comes out, and it's definitely like, if you're skeptic, you're gonna be skeptical about it. If you believe it, you're gonna believe it. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? It's not.
Yeah.
So I guess our listeners can just watch it and let us know what they think. But it's pretty crazy stuff what they do. I mean, the voice that comes out is not a normal voice, so but it's pretty cool stuff. But it was just kind of like it's just kind of interesting because it's like I don't know. I mean, basing this off of the movie and from what I was reading, it seems like it's like one of the most documented.
Well, yeah, and having
cases.
Yeah, like actual video of the interviews and stuff. It was kind of at a point where technology allowed it to be captured in a way that could kind of be persistent. So
yeah, it's like it's one of the most documented cases, but like we hadn't heard about it much. And I assume it's because it was in England and it happened in the 70s. You know, like just multiple reasons for it. But yeah. Anyway, so those are some of the stories. It's definitely interesting to read about, so I highly recommend you look it up if this is the kind of stuff you're into. For sure, look it up.
Yeah, I'll definitely check out more of that. That's kind of cool that it's that accessible.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, so that all kind of feeds into, I think that this movie was meant to be, a big goal of this movie was to build out the world of the Warrens. And so it kind of makes sense that they were written in maybe a little bit more than they actually were in real life.
Right.
But kind of, getting a little bit more of their backstory and developing their characters and then bringing them into this scary situation. That was one thing that I feel like this movie, it wasn't breaking new ground of introducing them. It was expanding the universe in which they lived.
Yeah.
And we've talked before about how, we like that when a movie creates a world that you can kind of go into and that is expandable and that leaves you still asking some questions and interested. And so I thought this one did a good job of that. It was nice that it tied back, with the Annabelle doll in their collection. And then, it was a good setup for The Nun, which comes out later. But yeah, overall, it was just kind of interesting, I thought, on a lot of different fronts.
It was definitely smart. It's definitely smart what they were doing, I feel like. Kind of like what you're saying. It's setting up, expanding the story, knowing that, they wanted to continue the Conjuring universe.
Yeah.
Which is, I feel like kind of a lot of movies are kind of doing that nowadays, specifically, like making a big universe, I guess. And, it's just why not do it with horror movies?
Yeah. Yeah, and so I guess like the other movies in the Conjuring series, this one was a period piece. Like you mentioned, it was set in 1977 England.
Yeah.
And I really liked the music that they used from that time, and then like that montage that they did at the beginning that just showed a bunch of like stock 70s British footage, And that was kind of a neat way to quickly establish the time and place of the movie without having to just come right out and say it. But in that, from that soundtrack, I also learned that Joyce Manor used basically all of the vocal hooks from Bus Stop by the Hollies in their song Up the Punks.
Oh.
Go check it out and try to tell me I'm wrong.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to check it out. And I'm going to try to prove you wrong.
Yeah. Well,
it's
good
what
luck.
I do.
Yeah.
No, I thought as far as like the music goes and the sound, like James Wan and like these types of horror movies, like Insidious and Conjuring, like they do a good job at, messing with you with the sound. I mean, not only like the music was, it was definitely nice. I feel like it was nice to hear like popular songs or like, just songs that we've heard before in a horror movie. I don't know how to explain it. So sometimes when we watch some older horror movies or like any horror movie, it seems like music's kind of like one of the last things that they kind of worry about.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the visual effects and so they were able to throw in actual music.
Yeah, like London Calling by The Clash.
Yeah, they were able to do that, and like with Elvis Presley, and just I assume because it's a bigger budget horror movie. But as far as like the usage of sound, like if it's the creepy music playing or just like the sounds of knocking, and like it really draws you in. Like they use that as one of the ways to draw you in. Now I felt like sometimes it was almost a little too much, like hand holding, like if it's like the music's building up and it's doing that Conjuring sound, like the crazy stringy instrument. I don't know, when it's doing that, the Conjuring sound, and it drops. It's like, okay, where's the jump coming? Kind of messes with you.
Yeah, I think the sound and filming and acting were all pretty good. Like, it was obviously a high budget movie made by talented people, and the story was good, but the way that it was just all presented and set up, I thought was great. Like how towards the beginning they have a lot of those long continuous shots inside the house of just like while the family is coming home and getting settled for the evening, and it's like it's introducing the setting and getting you familiar with it so that you have all these points of reference for what's to come. Like, it definitely emphasized that teepee in the hallway and the crooked man toy and the creepy laundry room with the flickering light and everything, and you know from the very beginning that that's all just set up, that all of those things are going to come back and like have significance through the story and stuff. And so I thought that was cool foreshadowing, and just the camera work in general. I mean, you know, lots of those long shots following the characters through the different rooms, and the overhead shots when it made sense, and the outside of the house, like everything done with the camera, I thought was just very intentional and really effective for what they were trying to do.
Yeah, I think one thing that I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of was like the dark shots. Like, the movie just seemed like it was 3/4 dark.
Yeah,
just constant. Which, yet again, it's a horror movie, but I mean, it was just almost too much. And I don't know if it's because I watched it during the day. So it was light inside, you know. So it was like I was having trouble seeing things. Like, you know, especially after The Haunting of Hill House, like, you want to see, like, if you catch anything in the background, and I couldn't do that because it was just too dark with the, you know, too much contrast. But
and that may be another example of where, like, seeing it in the theater was a really different experience, where you were in a completely dark room with surround sound and nothing to focus on but that. And I feel like it was almost like the camera was kind of always moving, like rotating slowly in a scene, and it seemed like what you wanted to see a lot of times was like just out of frame. And so it's almost like a frustration or an anxiety that comes with, I want to be able to see what's just to the left, but the camera is slowly moving to the right, and you have that feeling of danger that comes along with it. And you know, I liked that a lot.
I think it's I mean, it's definitely like almost like a signature style.
Yes,
I feel like
for sure.
James has.
Yeah, and one thing that stood out to me too about this movie that kind of made it scary, or in how it was trying to be scary, was that for the first half, it really felt like it borrowed a lot from Paranormal Activity, where you have these sequences of just like normal character and story development happening during the day, but then at night it goes into more of this like kind of subtle, just slow camera scans from different rooms throughout the house, and it's really dark, and then something super like subtle and creepy happens, and then that's sort of escalating over time, but it makes it feel like things are getting more intense, or like there's something building and coming, while keeping the story moving sort of outside of that during the daytime scenes. And so I think that's a cool way of maintaining the tension and the fear throughout the movie, even when there are scenes happening that don't have an opportunity for it. But then as the movie goes on, it doesn't just stop at like the peak of that, like I feel like Paranormal Activity did. It transitions into a more of like the Exorcist type possession horror. And so it was really, to me, interesting to see that combination of those two styles, because I think that we've seen each of those styles on its own explored a ton and replicated by a bunch of movies, but to have the one sort of build up into the other, I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, I definitely got the Exorcist vibe from this movie, for sure. Like, I mean, even from the voices alone. Yeah. Which is another thing that kind of trips me out with the actual recording, because that's what it sounds like.
Yes.
It's crazy. Like, that was what was, you know, kind of tripping me out, that same kind of creepy voice. But, and I think one of the things he, like, with the way that he filmed it with the long shots, like, I think it also kind of kept the house... I don't know why, but for me, like, it was almost kind of like a mystery of like you couldn't get the right layout of the house, like figuring out where the rooms were to each other, and I think that helped with like the confusion of, or like the hysteria that's going on in the house. Like, it kind of helped that for me. Like, I was like, okay, trying to figure out like which room they're at, like in the house, and like it almost seemed like it was flipped at one time, and I don't know, so. Which I don't think, I'm not in a bad way. Like, I think it was like it kind of kept the viewer confused on the location, so you don't have that comfort.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That comfort knowing where you're at in the house, I guess.
Yeah, and I've read that Stanley Kubrick did that very intentionally with The Shining.
Yeah.
Like, they would show people going down hallways and then turning right and, like, being in a room, and then later in the movie someone would go down the same hallway and turn right and they'd be in, like, the kitchen or something. So
Yeah.
it was, like, deliberately meant to make you never feel like you had your bearings. And yeah, I could see that with this, because there was a lot of, like, movement between spaces that we can talk more about later, but yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, in general, I thought it was a really well-written, well-executed, fun horror experience all around. The only real complaint I had from, like, the way the movie was made, and this is the same complaint I have with basically every movie in the Conjuring series, is that the CG was just so bad in some parts.
It was awful. Yeah.
Like, the Crooked Man. What?
Yeah, it almost looked like it was stop motion.
Yeah.
Like when he attacks Janet in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was almost like it was stop motion. I was like, God, that's so rough.
Yeah, and I don't
For a movie that came out
understand
in
it.
2016.
Yeah,
you know?
because it just seems so out of place by comparison to how high quality that the rest of the movie is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they could so easily do, like, the nun's face with just, like, a real person with makeup, and then superimpose that over the CG body or something, and it would be not nearly as bad. But man, it was rough.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, it was so bad that it just. I mean, it didn't ruin it, but it was so noticeable. I don't know if it was because like the rest, like I really feel like this movie's well put together.
Oh,
like
yeah.
I mean, and like I was saying, kind of based off of what we've been watching, like it was almost like a little relief because we knew what we were kind of getting ourselves into.
Yeah.
Going like watching the movie and then it pulls that out and it's just like
Yeah.
Because I thought that I'd seen this movie before. I hadn't.
Oh, really?
Seen this before. No,
Okay.
I don't know which one or what I was thinking of, but I mean I remember like it was weird. I remember a couple like scenes, so I don't know if I just watched it on YouTube or if it was shown in like I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't remember this movie at all.
Interesting.
Like the whole story to this movie. So for me, it was like exciting because it was also like, holy crap.
Yeah.
I have not seen this like I thought I have. Let's go. This is great.
Yeah.
So it was refreshing.
Cool. Well, awesome. Let's play the spoiler warning and then get into more of the specific stuff. We've covered a lot of ground here already, but I have a few specific things I want to get into that we can't until we are allowed to ruin things for people.
Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. If it's not obvious enough, warning, spoilers.
All right, so what did you love or hate about this movie?
Well, kind of like what I was talking about earlier. It was just refreshing to me. Like, I initially I wasn't a huge fan of these types of horror movies. Like, I mean, if anyone, basically we're the only two that's listened from day one, so we know.
Exactly.
Like, I hated jump scares.
Yes.
Like I was really against them, and just I almost felt like these types of horror movies were cheap. But now that we've watched so many horror movies in the past like 2 years that we've been doing this, or however long, that it's like you see anyway. So I loved basically just the style of horror movie, just as broad as that's going to be. Now if I'm going to get into specifics, like you kind of touch base with like foreshadowing the end, like he does. I didn't have any love or hate towards that. It was just kind of like it kind of, for me, I guess because I hadn't seen it before, like when at the end when the lightning strikes the tree and it all kind of came together, I guess, at that point, but anyway, so I loved the music, the way that they used the music, the filming. I wasn't a huge fan of the darkness. Some of like the dark shots where it was like covered in blue. Like this is like our third or fourth movie in a row where we kind of run into this, but it's just like it's blue and it's kind of hard to see. It's kind of confusing. I mean, I'm not a big, like, I don't we all know my stance on hauntings. Like, I don't believe in them, but I really like the idea of something like this happening, I guess. Like, that's what scares me, I guess. It's like, I don't believe it, but what if something like that all of a sudden happened? I don't know what I'm saying here, but anyway, I'm kind of all over the place, but I'm trying not to go into specific scenes because I've listened to our podcast and I do that every podcast.
That's fine. So my love on this one was that, like, and I know this is kind of minor, but I really like that they introduced that premonition of Ed's death at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that gave everything they did extra weight and intensity all through the rest of the movie. Mm-hmm. Because it's a horror movie, so it could happen. Like, it's not necessarily going to have a happy ending where everyone walks away. And it's like you, as the viewer, know that he's in more danger than he realizes. And I feel like that is just kind of a good way to up the intensity. And like you said, when it all sort of comes together in that last scene, that really is effective. So I liked that. My hate, and I really, obviously I like this movie a lot, but I already complained about the CG, so this time I'm going to say the length.
It's just a CG. And the length. Damn it.
That's why we tag team this. We cover everything. Man. Yeah. And, I don't remember feeling that way when I saw it in the theater, but it felt really long when I watched it at home this last time.
Yeah, it was super long.
And I think there are some scenes that very obviously could have been cut, like Ed's musical number.
Right.
It was just so awkward and out of place. And like, singing a love song with children is weird to me. And I don't know, there was just a few scenes like that.
It was very strange. Yeah,
where it's like this. It feels like the movie just hangs out for a minute. Like, it's not moving the story along and stuff. So I feel like with a little bit of editing, it could have been better. But again, like I said, I didn't necessarily feel that way when I saw it in the theater.
Yeah, I think for me, as far as the length goes, it almost seemed like it was two different movies. Like, you had like the haunting,
agreed, like
up until about an hour into the movie, it felt like, and then when Ed and Lorraine showed up, it was just, that was when it was which it was, so it was a long movie, but at least it was kind of split up. Like, we didn't have like 15 minutes of haunting and then an hour and 45 minutes of Ed and Lorraine trying to figure out what's going on. So but it was, yet again, it was definitely super, super long.
Yeah.
And the bad thing too, when I watch like these movies I could watch I could watch like Last of the Mohicans, which is a long movie, and like just sit there and watch it all the way through. But if I'm doing anything for the podcast,
like
I'm
taking
not
notes.
saying who. Yeah, it's taking notes, but like it seems like I'm always interrupted, so I'm pausing. So like a 2-hour movie ends up being like a 3.5 hour ordeal.
And that doesn't sound familiar at all.
Yeah, it was like this morning. Like, I was watching it again this morning. It was like trying to get me to make breakfast, and I was like, I'm trying to watch this, and so it was just it's an ordeal. But that's on me. That's not on the.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about, and that happens here too. So
we're trying to watch it for the podcast.
Yeah.
But anyway, so definitely long, but yet again, like, there wasn't too. We've watched like some movies where it's just like you just kind of like roll your eyes. You're just like, okay, I get it. Like, let's go. This one, I didn't necessarily have like any frustration. It was just like, oh Jesus, we still have an hour to go. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. So.
Yeah. So I guess kind of going into scenes.
Yeah.
I really loved the opening of this movie.
Yeah.
That very first scene where they're having the seance and the camera slowly zooms in on Lorraine's face, and then her eyes open and it zooms out, and like the color of everything has totally changed, and it has that dark tint. And then you see everyone else is still at the table with their eyes closed, including her, but she's also like up moving around, and she hears those whispers and goes to the top of the stairs, and the door opens itself, and she's like reliving the murders as the murderer, but she's not like enjoying it. She's like suffering, and it's really intense. And then there's the creepy kid with the white eyes that leads her to the basement and points to the mirror, and she sees the nun. And so that's like and it's all like very jerky and jumpy, like stuff isn't happening naturally, and people aren't moving normally. And then the sound that's added makes it extra intense. But I think that was such a good setup for the rest of the movie, and it did a lot of foreshadowing that, you know, all got tied up or all related back to something else. But just that feeling of, I'm starting this movie and all of a sudden I'm on the edge of my seat, like, immediately, I thought was just a great intro.
Yeah, and kind of like you were saying, the foreshadowing, because there was another scene, this isn't my favorite scene, but there was another scene where, like, early on with Bill, like, with Janet sitting in the couch, and it kind of goes from darkness, like from nighttime, and the camera pans over and it starts raining, and then it's light outside, and like that's how the scene changes. It's like a Haunting of Hill House move, which was done before then, so what can you say? Anyway, like that was like, oh, okay, that's great, like that's pretty cool. I definitely like those transitions.
Yes.
My favorite, I mean, one of my favorite scenes, but the one I'll talk most about, I guess, is where Lorraine, she's at her house, so this is not even in England, and you know the whole scene where like the daughter kind of notices someone, and she goes in and she's in the office, I guess it's their like their main office, and the nun's in there, and just that whole sequence of events that kind of happens where she's trying to figure out what's going on, but you have the nun painting on the wall, and it goes from like a shadow walking around the wall and ends up standing exactly where that painting is, and then the shadow, you know,
those black hands come out, or the gray hands, I mean, just like trying to figure out like what's what, like it turns into, I was like, that's pretty, like that's a legit, like that's a legit scene, I thought, like definitely
black shadow that and it's in a dark corner because it's this movie, everything was dark, and then it turns into the nun, and but anyway,
that was cool.
I thought that was pretty legit.
So I feel like a bunch of these scenes, and kind of like I talked about before, but in the first part of the movie, it's a lot of like more subtle stuff, and I guess one of my favorites of those was when Janet goes downstairs at night and sees the chair rocking itself, and she kind of freaks out, so she runs back up to her room and then closes the door and uses the chair in the room to like wedge the door shut. And then she gets in bed and is like pulling the covers over her and is scared, and then she rolls over and she sees the chair that she had used to wedge the door shut is just right there next to her bed, and the door is wide open. And it's just like, okay, whatever is in this house is just toying with her. I mean, that was such a like power statement. It was just like do whatever you want. That's not going to even slow me down. I can do whatever I want in this house anytime I want to, and you are completely powerless to stop. And I don't even have to hurt you unless I want to, and when I want to, nothing can stop me. Like it was so, I thought, just such a malevolent use of power in a subtle way, I guess, that I really liked that. And I feel like there were, throughout the beginning of the movie, a lot of the scenes sort of on that same wavelength, and I liked that a lot. That was kind of more the Paranormal Activity inspired part of the movie.
I think so. This is kind of, you know, my not on the spot answer, but what I enjoyed about this movie was it wasn't just the family that was experiencing the hauntings.
Oh yeah.
You know, the police did, the neighbor, like everyone. So it wasn't like normally with these types of movies, it's like only happens to the family, and then you have the people who don't believe, and it's just like, I don't know, but like I definitely enjoyed that aspect. So I thought that was pretty cool. But if I'm going to talk about another scene real quick, when Lorraine, when they first get to England, Jana's sitting in the couch or on the chair. She puts the water in her mouth, and they talk. They talk to Bill, but they have to turn around. I really enjoyed how Ed talked to Bill. He was just like, he was just being like a G about it. He was just like, you know, okay, like what he starts talking about Ed. Is it Ed, Eddie, or Edward? Like, what'd your father call? And he just kind of rolled his eyes. He's like, my father called me Ed. Let's talk. You know, it's just like, as a matter of fact, and I was like, hell yeah, man. Like that's he's not scared in that situation. And it's kind of cool to, you know, have like a ghost hunter that's just like, this is all part of it, you know. But could be that they were still juggling with the fact, like, is this real? Is this not real? But yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, for sure. And that was one thing too that I thought was good. That I liked about the movie, in that it developed Ed and Lorraine's character a lot, and it had some little things that I thought were very telling, like when they went on the show and the guy was trying to call them out on their research not being legit, when you've seen from the previous movies that it is, and so they're having to deal with like the whole PR side of things. And then when they, like in that scene especially, Ed came across as such a professional, because he's just like, yeah, you're not going to screw with me. I'm not afraid of you. Like, any tactic that you think you're going to use to mess with people isn't going to work. This isn't my first paranormal investigation. Let's cut the crap and get down to like a real conversation. You know, it just the professionalism of it, and him being like in his element and knowing what he was doing and everything, I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it was little things like that what helped me enjoy this movie. Like, it kind of took my attention away from other things. Yeah, and then I also really liked the more overt possession scenes. One good example is when like that youngest kid was going to let the dog out, and then the dog turns into the Crooked Man, and the CG was super bad on that. But then the kid comes running, and everybody's like in the living room, and you hear the Crooked Man coming down the hall, and then all of a sudden you see it's Janet, and she comes around the corner, but she's talking in his voice, and stuff is like flying around, and then she's foaming at the mouth. Like, just some of those possession scenes I thought were super unsettling and scary, and they pulled them off really, really well. Yeah, I think there was like, I don't know. Yeah, I think with mine, like, this, as far as scenes go, another little thing was like, I don't remember his name, but the brother, like, there was the knives in the kitchen, which yet again, it was almost too dark to see what was going on, and you couldn't really see it until the kid walked in. But he was like, no, Ed said we need to be tough about this or whatever, and he goes in the kitchen, and then kind of all hell breaks loose in there. And then that's what films it. Now I wanted, so there were little scenes I liked, but one scene I definitely wasn't a fan of, or one thing I wasn't definitely a fan of, was when they left because of the recording. Oh yeah, like that footage. Yeah. Like, it was just like you saw the mom get bit, right? Yeah, on the arm, and he was saying that he had to because of they were something by the I don't know. Yeah, but it was just like, well, it felt that like could have cut out a lot of time. I guess, you know, it's just like, they could have accomplished this by having them go somewhere and then realize all that stuff without the whole long scene of them leaving, and it was just kind of frustrating. But so I guess, and I have a point to make along similar lines regarding the ending. And the ending is basically that Lorraine gets in the house and confronts the nun who is trying to shove Ed and Janet out the window onto the spiky tree stump below. And then Lorraine remembers that the nun told her its name in her vision earlier in the movie. And then she like says the name, and it disappears, and they all live happily ever after. Yeah. And as far as endings go, I really thought that was kind of weak. Like, why did the nun tell her its name? Yes, exactly. like it was one of those like real, because I feel like the ending scene was really intense, and it's where you're like on the edge of your seat about these characters that the movie has made you care about, and you're really hoping that they survive, but you know that there's a chance that they don't, and then they narrowly escape, and you feel relieved. And when I saw it in the theater, that was more of like how I experienced it, that whole sequence. But sitting at home and taking notes as I was watching, and not being as like in the moment of it, it just really didn't add up quite as well. Right. Yeah, it was like, you just gave away, which I guess that's kind of like a bad guy horror, or bad guy action movie kind of thing, where they give away their plan, and then but it was just like, you just gave away your weakness, dummy. But yeah, not everything can be perfect, I guess. Yeah. And it's also like, really, you just gotta say her name. That's it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think, so in my notes I put that was kind of a lackluster ending. Like, it's just kind of, but leading up to that, it was definitely interesting. Like, going through the basement, like kind of seeing the vision at the kind of coming full circle. I thought it was interesting, and then it was just like she was hanging out the window, Ed was holding on to her, Lorraine was up against the wall and says the nun's name, and it's just over with. And
they all lived happily ever after.
But,
just another nice, heartwarming family horror movie.
Exactly. Yeah. I think as far as like, I think for me, like, I'm maybe a bigger fan of Insidious than this one.
Agree.
But but it's still, like, I thought it was great. Like, I'll definitely watch it again too. It's also one of those, like, where we watch Conjuring, so then you got to watch Conjuring 2 and just, keep it going.
Yeah, for sure. I liked it. The only other thing I had in my notes that didn't really like have a place that fit well in the episode was just how it felt like there was a lot of dragging people through locations, and I didn't want to talk about that before the spoiler warning, but you were talking about being kind of disoriented as to where things were in the house. So like Janet getting pulled from one room into another, so it's like all of a sudden now she's on the other side of a locked door somehow, or breaking from the basement into the room above, or Lorraine following people around the house in that vision and kind of jumping between places. Like I thought that was really interesting, and I thought that aligns perfectly with what you said earlier about it being unsettling because you never really feel like you know where you are or what the rules are about getting from one place to another. Yeah. I mean, that's said perfectly. I mean, you kind of always had the tent where that was like the one thing that kind of helped you, but at the same time you're just like, which end of the hall is this on? I don't know. So it was definitely disoriented, but like you say, it helped out though. Like it kept the interest perked. Yep. Well, cool. I think we have thoroughly dissected this movie.
Yeah. I mean, pretty pumped about it.
Yeah.
I was pretty happy to watch this.
That was a good choice. And I will give you credit. You were the one that suggested this movie.
You picked this one out. Oh, did I pick this one out?
You did,
You picked Purge.
Yep.
Okay.
So.
Hey, you know why I picked it?
Because you're good at picking things?
No, it's just on a list of horror movies.
I thought you were going to say,
isn't Conjuring 2. We haven't done that. Actually, I think the conversation went, have we done Conjuring? You go, yeah. And I was like, we should do Conjuring 2.
Yeah. I considered it an apology for Eden Lake.
Yeah. Yeah, no, man. Jesus Christ.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
So we could just like give any spoiler to everything, right?
Yeah.
Because I got some for that Avengers movie.
I got some for the Game of Thrones finale.
Let's just
or
do
not the finale,
dude.
just the new episode. Yeah.
I just read, like, everyone's freaking out about the Avengers movie, and I just read it. Like, I read the synopsis
You
on
just
IMDb, and I was like, oh, cool. Like, it's like
now I have all the power.
Yeah. And so, like, Katie was talking yesterday. She went to Wichita, and she was talking about how Barb and Josh are going to watch it today, and I was like, you should just give out like, I'll tell you what happens, and you should just scream it out.
Yeah.
Like, let's just get them.
Here's the list of people that die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, here's what happens.
Yeah.
And it says for like exactly what happens. I don't need to watch it. Like, I have no desire to watch it. I didn't even watch the first Endgame.
Yeah.
Because I read it.
Yeah.
It's funny though, because it's like how mad people are actually getting about this, about the spoilers. And it's like, I don't know if I care about anything.
Yeah.
Or like any movie or anything. Like, we like horror movies, but it just doesn't. I don't know. It just doesn't bother me. It's like, I don't know if I'm that obsessed with anything.
Yeah.
Where I don't want to know the outcome. Like Oklahoma City Thunder loss, I have no need to live. You know what I mean?
Oh.